To get back to your question, how beautiful life is. And for me, it always has been that quest to find and go back to that innate intuitive intelligence that we have. And I see connecting with that, and basically connecting mind and body in a way, becoming sensitive to that wisdom we feel inside. So going on those inner explorations has always been a big part of that path, and recognizing that perfection. And in recognizing perfection, not recognizing perfection in myself, I have a lot of flaws, if you want to say that in a way, but perfection in the way things you can uncover about yourselves. Yeah, that's been a big part of that journey. And some people call it synchronicity. You then start to recognize and in all the imperfections, perfection. But I think mostly it's about losing the resistance towards the now.
Hello and welcome back to Stories of Being. I'm Ingrid, and each week I sit down with individuals who are challenging the way we relate to ourselves, each other, and our planet. In today's episode, I talk to Maarten Van Huijstee. Maarten is the CEO and founder of Dutch company Spinoza, a business that offers psychedelic retreats, workshops, microdosing kits, and education that is all about self-inquiry and healing. Maarten has an incredible presence about him, and I think he's a great example of kind of what, a true leader looks like. He is wise and compassionate, but also has this real strength and, like I said, presence about him. I also think he's a great example of what a businessman of the future looks like, in the sense that Maarten creates and builds businesses that is so much more than a product or a service. It's almost like business is the vehicle that helps create individual and societal change. In this conversation, we chat psychedelics, obviously, Maarten's journey from kind of a typical Dutch frat boy, and the evolution and kind of journey he went on to get to the place where he is now, healing this massive divide we see in society, our connection and relationship with nature, and so much more. This is a really valuable conversation about the potential and possibility that just exists in the world, and our ability to make change as both individuals and also a collective. I also just want to say a massive thanks to Maarten again for being so generous with his time. Maarten has 3 kids and is involved with many businesses, and we recorded this at, I think it was about 11 p.m. Dutch time. So yes, thank you again, Maarten, for taking the time to have this conversation. I hope everyone enjoys. As always, let me know what you think, like, subscribe, share it, and yeah, please enjoy. There might be people listening to this podcast who have a certain idea about psychedelics. They might think about psychedelics as tripping out or hallucinating and losing your mind. And there might be some fear around that word psychedelics. So set the foundation for this conversation. I'd love to hear from you on how you would describe psychedelics to someone who has that kind of idea about them. And then, or someone who just doesn't know what psychedelics are.
Yeah, let's do it. Psychedelics actually stems from 2 words for the people that don't know the word psychedelics yet. And that means psyche and delos. And psyche is like the mind or the soul, and delos is like manifesting. So psychedelics is about mind manifesting, and they relate to substances that create like an enlargement of consciousness, or an expanding of consciousness, so to say. And to bring that more to a biological or physiological level, these substances create 2 things, basically. One is a neuroplasticity in a more medical term. So it's especially on the higher dose of the use of psychedelics. I think Michael Pollan used this phrase. It's like a big pack of snow falls inside your head, and you have the ability to make new tracks. So we look at the world through certain pathways that we create, certain habits and patterns in our mind. A phrase often used is what fires and wires together. So We create already as a young person, as a young being, certain patterns. And every time we look or think in similar ways, or certain emotions in our nervous system, in our autonomic nervous system, we can talk a little bit more about it and how that connects to the breath. Yeah, we create these habits and we look at the world in a certain way. And that's why there's now so many research in almost all large medical centers in the world, because some of these habits and patterns can be quite negative thought patterns about ourselves and the way we live, and but also some addictions we build up. And I'm not only talking to addictions as like addiction to alcohol or certain foods, but also addictions to thought and emotions that we have. And some of them, these can be quite negative. The depression is basically just a pattern, a repetitive voice we hear in our mind about ourselves or the situation we're in, or a certain worldview or a negative view we have about ourselves, which can be very destructive in ways. So that's the one side. So we have an ability to go into a different groove inside our head, so to say, or create a different loop or a different way of thinking or a different perspective, if you look at it from a more philosophical way. And the other one is that it decreases, so it increases this neuroplasticity, and it decreases activity in the default mode network. And the default mode network is a network in our prefrontal cortex, which is connected to our amygdala, which is sometimes described as our fear center. And in the default mode network arises this voice, this inner rumination we have. And as I said before, this can be quite negative. Everybody recognizes this inner voice that we have. And for some people, well, a Buddhist teacher of mine said, some people, they have Radio North Korea in their head. And it's sometimes nice that there's a decrease of activity there. And on the higher dosage, if you really go to ceremonial use of psychedelics, which can be magic mushroom, ayahuasca, DMT substances, or LSD on a higher dosage, you have this real ego death. So this voice really subsides completely, and you have this complete feeling of unity with the totality, because this inner voice creates our individuality. Like on a metaphysical level, we are far more connected than we think. Of course, we view ourselves as this walk in of inside our skin, like this biological thing which is not connected and sometimes can feel very lonely. But we are, every cell is for 99.99999% nothingness, right? So like, even if you look at an atom, is a nucleus with an electron spinning around in it at a far distance from the nucleus. So it appears that we are on a very small level, but also on a big level, far more connected than we thought we are, and then we feel reality to be. And the psychedelic state, especially again, if you go into deep ceremonial use or into the high doses, you really have this unity feeling sometimes, and you see the world as something which is fully connected. And these sort of mystical experiences have, and there's a lot of research out there as well, and this is also research in many of the current universities in the world, has a profound, deep meaning, and can cause people to have deep shifts in perspective on how to live their lives, their worldview, the way they see themselves towards the future.
Yeah. And what has your journey been like with psychedelics? Have psychedelics completely changed your view of yourself and the world? Were you already on that journey and you just use psychedelics to propel that? Or what's your experience been like with psychedelics, and then how that's changed, how you view yourself and the world?
Yeah, they've been a big part of my, so to say, my journey in life. I was raised as a very regular, normal boy here in the Netherlands. I'm really nothing special in that sense. I was really enjoyed my sports as a youth. I was good at something we had actually. Australia is also quite big in it. Field hockey, but the Dutch are also good at it. And I played at the highest levels. And I went to university, also very common. I studied law in my third and fourth or second and third year, I started managing a club, a nightclub. And this was a period when I was really, of course, you're young, there's alcohol, there are girls, and there's a lot of nightlife. And I wasn't paying a lot of attention to me as an athlete. And at the end of those years, I really looked at myself. I had gained like over 10 kilos in weight. And I was brought up very protected at the hockey club and in a village outside of a city in the Netherlands, Utrecht. And I looked at myself as, wow, I really need to broaden my perspective than only the fraternity life and the nightclub and the hockey field. And so I bought around the world tickets, which in those days you still had. So you had to fly from the east to the west or vice versa. And you could take as many tickets, but you always had to go 1 degree further.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to go to New York as well. But I also wanted to go to South America. So my first city that I could still make New York upwards was Caracas, Venezuela.
Oh.
And so the first couple of months were in South America, in Venezuela and Colombia. And this was already the first time that I saw in the jungles, because I was really into just moving deep into the jungles and do some remote traveling. And this is the first time that I saw just civilizations living completely differently than I was used to. And they were still using all kinds of plant medicine. And I didn't know anything about that. This was already slowly, my eyes started opening that we in the West have created a system of eating and pharmacology, which is mainly, and actually, I started working at a company like Unilever and Heineken afterwards, still not really knowing how processed foods and chemicals really hurt our system. But in that year of travel, from going into these jungles and learning about plant medicine, I just slowly started opening my eyes to looking not only through the lens of what I was taught in Western medicine, or how I was conditioned to look at the world. So in that year, was from South America to North America and then into Asia via Australia and New Zealand, actually, which were already quite westernized, but still beautiful nature. And then into Southeast Asia, where I had done my full moon parties with magic mushrooms. And so this whole travel was going from places. And then I ended up in Nepal and India and walked through the mountains for months. And that's where I started really being engaged with more ceremonial use. So really using, in that case, the cannabis plant and magic mushrooms to connect with Shiva. So yeah, that journey was just for me in opening up towards different cultures, different way of thinking, and just allowing me to slowly not look through only the lens of my conditioning, but to open my mind. And these plants and psychedelic, in this case, mushrooms, really connected me deeply with nature. Or for me, that is a synonymous for God. And in the Hindu tradition, it was then the great Shiva. So and then meditations came into my life, and yoga and breath work. So this was already in my university years.
Oh, wow.
I moved back. So this is 99.
Yeah, wow.
Right? So this is not like, it's like almost 25 years ago. And then these practices and these plans have always stayed in my life. and I've used them off and on for the learnings, and sometimes in difficult periods to help me out, and also in very joyful ways. But they've always been like a red thread. But I'm still, it's only slowly that you start opening up to these practices. So I came back into my fraternity and my fraternity house, and these guys thought I was completely nuts by doing yoga and meditation. You're talking in '99, eh?
Yeah.
And this is for the Netherlands. We're a very open, liberal society, but we also have still very conservative ways of thinking within universities and fraternities and all that. So, like I said, after university, I first worked at a law firm and then worked at Unilever for a while and then joined Heineken and then really started going more into the creative industry. And after selling my an advertising agency at a quite young age, I had made a little bit of money and bought some freedom, and then I decided to start a yoga school. Co-founded it with Wessel Paternotte, or he already had a school, and together we really grew from one to two schools and three, and then the whole thing happened. I started teaching more the meditation and the breath works, and this led at the end to founding a company called Spinoza, which is really focused on, well, we say it's our mission to reconnect people with nature and to accelerate the world's transition to a more natural medicine. So really reinstituting these plant medicines and these more ceremonial or the use of psychedelics for deep healing and well-being.
And with starting Spinoza, like it feels like at the moment, the last few years, in recent times, there's been this like renaissance of psychedelics and that connection to self and also others and nature. And that this renaissance from, say, the 1960s, that sort of popped up and it's happening again. Starting Spinoza, it's just in the cultural kind of zeitgeist, right? Psychedelics. When you started Spinoza, had you been thinking about it for a while? Because you've started it in this time where it's so needed. And so I'm just curious if it was just this moment of like, I'm starting it. Was it a long process? Did it just feel like the right time? And also that question, but then also what do you think and feel about this kind of renaissance that's happening, and why do you think it's happening at this moment in time in terms of the use of psychedelics and the use of them in that healing capacity?
Yes, let me first answer the first question about how it evolved. And so after the opening of the fifth yoga school in Amsterdam, and really had been committed towards building that community and really working with meditation, yoga, and breath work, and a group of teachers, my third child was born. And my wife and I, after the death of her father, actually, which had been ill for several years, we really felt like we wanted to get out and also spend some more time on with the youngest kids. And after the death of the father of my wife, which had a long sick bed, we decided to go on a more foreign adventure. And this was also a time for myself to be with the small kids. We had three kids. The third one was just born when we left for Lisbon, or just outside of Lisbon in the mountains of Sintra. And I had been teaching and in the yoga schools, been mostly engaged with Eastern philosophy, Buddhism and Hinduism. Not that I was a Buddhist or a Hindu, or it's just some of these practices and tools and teachings were just very close to my heart and helped me over in the last 20 years. But somehow I had always felt that I really wanted to explore my own consciousness, my own philosophers, and really Western philosophy. So already for a couple of years, I started exploring more Western philosophy. And when I really wanted to go into the Dutch culture, of course, you end up at, which is an amazing philosopher. And in reading Spinoza, which actually Spinoza itself has quite an Eastern view, I really found, wow, like it felt like coming home. And Spinoza is a Sephardic. His family, he was born in Amsterdam, but his parents are from Portugal. And I always loved as well surfing. So that's been a big part of my life, surfing the waves. So the two things came together, and I said to my wife that I had always looked at Portugal as a great place to stay. So we went into the mountains there, and yeah, had a beautiful house, really remote in a deep, beautiful forest. And yeah, so that's where I started studying again the work of Spinoza, and then you end up also in Greek philosophy. But it was in those times again that I really re-engaged with the plants and started farming different plants, and also, of course, creating a little place in the house where I could farm the magic mushrooms. And yeah, one thing led into another. I started teaching there in the house and taking people out into the forest. And then in 2018, I decided I wanted to host the first retreats with psychedelics. So it was a quite gradual, natural process from living in the forest and being with nature, and then engaging with something which I had been engaged already for at that stage, like almost 20 years. And these plants had always been a part of my life, but I really felt like the time was also, some of the larger universities were already doing some research, and so it was slowly the world was ready for this renaissance, as you call it. And I had also felt that in Amsterdam, also within the yoga schools, Delight Yoga, there was always like a part of the community was into psychedelics and the use of plants. And of course, Ayurveda is very much based on plants as well. Also, psychedelic plants in some parts of the Ayurveda. Some people, the same in the yoga world, are really not into that. But in the old cultures, also in the old Hindu tradition, you have pockets and streams which are really into plant medicine. So it was a little bit divided. So I never felt also the freedom to do this within the yoga school. So when I got out and I was also not operationally involved anymore, I felt, okay, now it's time to really start engaging with it again. And then, yeah, one thing led to another. I was already with my founding partner, Aito de la Rua, which is an Argentinian friend of mine. We were already talking and investigating. And then he's actually the son of an Argentinian president and an ex-president, and his father was quite ill at the time and later on as well died. But in some of the last conversations he has had with his father, said, you need to study Spinoza. And so he was like, oh, wow. Like, I have a very good mate and brother writing about Spinoza in the mountains of Sintra. So at one point he phoned me up and said, can I come over to Lisbon, and can you introduce me in the work of Spinoza? And I said, yeah, for sure. In any way I can help out. And of course, a difficult time for him losing his father. But so he came to Lisbon, and basically there in the mountains, we, yeah, started talking, and the book has not yet finished on Spinoza yet, but the company came. Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing? You mentioned it with when you were first talking about like working with psychedelics in your 20s, the red thread, and even you just telling that story, like how that all came together is quite amazing. Like even being in Portugal, Spinoza's parents were Portuguese. Like it's quite just incredible how all of those little things were working together to then build up to Spinoza.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
No, life is really amazing if you want to see it. And I think that goes for every life story if paying attention. And Spinoza was a determinist. He had a deterministic worldview. And he believed in perfection, that nature or God, that was his main line, Deus sive natura, God is nature, or is a synonymous to nature. And that there is this larger force in a way we don't understand yet, but it is logical and harmonious, and probably we will never understand because it's so complex, this causal network that is at play, and we are, just through education or learning, gaining a bigger understanding, but also talked in like different levels of knowledge, which the first level, he didn't put them in orders or anything, but one of them is the imaginary, he called it, which is our senses giving us one way of looking at the world. But that can be quite deceiving. And is like you need also rationality and reason to understand what the senses give you. Like before Copernicus, people looked at the sun going underneath in the ocean. They thought, hey, the sun goes into the ocean and it would come up every day again. And then, of course, there was a bright mind that thought, no, it's like we're spinning and we're falling in a vortex behind the sun in a way. So we had to gain through reason and understanding and learning a lot of things, and that skewed our way differently, or that changed our perspective at life. So you have the imaginary reason, and then the highest form of knowledge in his thinking was also getting back to our intuition. So we have this innate deep wisdom within us. And so to get back to your question, how beautiful life is. And for me, it always has been that quest to find and go back to that innate intuitive intelligence that we have. And I see connecting with that, and basically connecting mind and body in a way, becoming sensitive to that wisdom we feel inside. So going on those inner explorations has always been a big part of that path, and recognizing that perfection. And in recognizing perfection, not recognizing perfection in myself, I have a lot of flaws, if you want to say that in a way, but perfection in the way things, or the way things you can uncover about yourselves. That's been a big part of that journey. And some people call it synchronicity. You then start to recognize, and in all the imperfections, perfection. But I think mostly it's about losing the resistance towards the now, right? For a lot of people, if you constantly question, this is again happening to me, shit, the pandemic, this illness, no, apparently it had to be like that because it is.
Yes. Yeah.
And losing that resistance opens up to better decision making, because you're not constantly frustrated with the moment, with the now. If you lose that fear and that frustration, you have a greater ability to respond, and to really the ability to respond, so you can take your responsibility to respond.
Yes, yeah.
And it's really about taking ownership of your own life and uniting with this beautiful causal network. Apparently, karmically, you had to be in that position with your nurture and nature, and you were created in that exact moment. And if you start seeing and recognizing that, and you lose that resistance towards the now, towards what's happening in your life, you just gain a lot of ability to respond.
Yeah. And it's much more, it can be very disempowering when external dictate then how we feel. It's a much more empowering approach or way of seeing the world, because we're not then dictated by the external as much, which I guess, like you were saying before, is something that psychedelics can help with, is that reconnection to self and actually changing the way we see the world and taking away those barriers. So then we're able to approach life a little bit more easier in that way.
Yeah, I think you phrase it nicely. I think psychedelics, in a way, and this is again, of course, we created this company, we call it Spinoza, because we do want the shift of perspective, and sometimes philosophy can really help out about thinking about things. And psychedelics is, especially in the higher dosage, but also in the lower, you become really sensitive towards the body. And it's really connecting mind and body in a very deep and profound way. And it's connecting you with everything in a very deep and profound way. And if you start realizing that we are not like Descartes, and Spinoza and Descartes lived in the same city in Amsterdam when they were writing several papers and books that have changed the world and have changed our views. And Descartes' view was that we are a mind in a body, and that there's actually no connection between the two. And his view was that we have to conquer nature, right? And Spinoza and Descartes, they had similar views in parts, but they really had a big disagreement. Descartes' philosophy is dualism. So there's a difference between mind and matter, mind and body, and they're separate from each other. And Spinoza is a monist. So he sees that mind and body are one and the same, and they're part of the one substance, this ocean-like consciousness, which there is no divide between the two. They're always the same. They're just two different reflections of the one substance or God or nature. And psychedelics has this amazing power to make you experience that on a very deep and profound way. Because if you talk about it and you think about it, you go, yeah, but my thoughts, they feel different than my body. And, oh, but maybe this is just like one cosmic hologram that we're experiencing. And on a quantum physics level, it is basically like that. More that it maybe operates more as like a collective mind that we're experiencing.
Yes.
But we experience it sometimes as matter. So this is still a quarrel which is out there, right? But the medical system followed the Descartesian thought. So we have doctors for the body and we have doctors for the mind. And we at Spinoza have a far more holistic view on it. And we see that connecting with nature and connecting with sometimes some of these plants, and which we already do daily. We connect with vegetables and we connect with, but this really more natural approach from unprocessed foods and healthy being out in nature as well. And really, again, engaging with the totality of and living with the seasons and living with the stars in a way. And this is not woo-woo. There's really deep, profound science about this. You can ask any, and women have far better understanding because they live, of course, with their cycles much more than men do.
Yeah.
That's another side of the story of psychedelics or plant medicine. And you have to go back a few centuries, actually, is that psychedelics, they stimulate or are agonists of the serotonin hormonal system or neurotransmitter. So we have between two neurons, we create these neurotransmitters, and you have dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin and melatonin. You have a whole range of neurotransmitters that make these connections. And psychedelics, they stimulate different networks, but in the current state of the research, it definitely is an agonist for the serotonin neurotransmitters or networks. And it's a very sensitive, and if you would like to say it, it's more a female energy. It's about connection, and it's about sensitivity, and it's about feeling. And another big one is dopamine. And dopamine is more a male energy. So a lot of the drugs in the world, some of them, and not only drugs, but like alcohol is dopamine. And you feel it also when you drink. Like sugar is so it's a reward system. So it's a craving system. Caffeine, coffee is dopamine. Cocaine is dopamine. So swiping is dopamine. The little reward that we get when we swipe, on Instagram or on YouTube or on our email is dopamine. it's really I
Interesting.
love dopamine. Don't get me wrong about dopamine, but it's super addictive, and we get tolerant towards it, so we want more and more. And that's with psychedelics, it's far more gentle, connected feeling side. And so an agonist or activates our serotonin system. And why am I telling this story? Because in the fourth century, or this story where I'm explaining this a little bit, in the fourth century after Christ, when, and this is of course, there are different viewpoints on this, I'm just telling you which I think basically happened, is that the patriarch started. So the more male dominance within the church. And it's some of the old rituals, some of the old Greek rituals, they probably also involved using of the different wines. And these were not your regular Merlots at the time when the old Greeks used them, but they used all kinds of plants. And probably the women priests, which were responsible for making these wines, not all of them, but probably quite a bit, used also plants that induced this more serotonin, female-like part in their old ceremonies. And there was a more esoteric cult called the cult of Demeter, of Mother Earth, Demeter, and it was Eleusis, which was 13 miles outside of Athens. These were Plato and Marcus Aurelius were in this cult. So the foundations of Western civilization. And Plato also attributes his wisdom towards these Eleusinian mysteries. So in the cult of Demeter, in the temple of Eleusis outside of Athens. And they use these like ceremony-like rites, a 9-day fast, more or less, with fasting and dancing. And then when pagan Christianity or Christianity started growing within the Roman Empire, more or less, these old Greek rituals were still transported throughout the region. And of course, they were still used, or that is the current hypothesis, which has been written about by many authors and scientists and historians in ways, but I think more research still needs to be done. But then when the Romans adopted Christianity as their state religion in the fourth century after Christ, slowly the women started, the priestess started being basically the witch hunt that started. And a lot of these plants slowly had to go out of these rituals, and the wines needed to be purified from all these plants and fungi. And the same goes for the beers. And then the more dopamine-based alcohol became also the way to celebrate the Eucharistus celebration. So ever since we had this more male energy in our rites and in our fasts with alcohol, and the witches were burned with all their more plants. And again, there are many viewpoints at history in that sense, but you now see an upcoming again of more of this ceremonial use of these plant medicine and really reconnecting again with feeling and the body and reconnecting again with nature. I think it's a much needed transition towards this more connected way of looking at the world, and us connecting again with nature, and also connecting again with the wisdom of the body and this more female energy within ourselves.
Yes. It's interesting. The witch thing I think is so interesting because I've been thinking about it recently, and really I've thought witches just women who understood their own power, worked with nature, worked with plants, and that was extremely, or it could have been threatening. So it's just interesting you brought that up. And also when you were talking, I was thinking like the way you guys at Spinoza do or facilitate and run retreats are very ceremonies essentially, and they're holistic in the sense that they are in nature, there's music, it's very collaborative, there's this, it's this really holistic way of doing it. I wonder if when potentially psychedelics and MDMA just got approved in Australia. And that will be a whole process of actually anything happening. It will take years probably. But I do wonder with things like that, if that kind of holistic, connected way of working with, say, psychedelics or psilocybin will just become a very narrow, clinical, the molecules isolated, and it's this more, it's done in a much more kind of narrow and reductive way. And if it's done like that, and if it's sitting in a room with white walls kind of thing, if some of that power of the plant is actually lost and the way it's used is lost because you're not connected to your nature, you're not connected to people necessarily, you're not connected to music. And as you were talking, I was thinking like that's actually almost like a masculine way of doing it because you're controlling the plant, whereas the way you guys do it, which is connected to nature in ceremony, is more of that feminine connected power. As psychedelics and the power of psychedelics in terms of healing becomes maybe more mainstream and there's more research and it potentially becomes more medicalized. Yeah, what do you think of that? Do you think that regardless it becoming more mainstream and medicalized is a good thing, or we really need to stay connected to the plant in kind of a holistic way?
I think it's great that science is getting involved into psychedelics, first and foremost. I think it's really crucial that we are doing a lot of research at the moment. And I can still remember with yoga and meditation that it was always on the fringes. And then science got involved and they started measuring and they started seeing, wow, people that meditate, they feel better and they feel more connected. And it's a really great way to fight stress. And yoga, if you do X, Y, and Z, certain series. So it's a great way to introduce people into something and to create a mainstream movement, which is necessary also for psychedelics. I think the clinical side of doing this research is important. We're seeing as well with professors and psychiatrists and psychologists coming to our ceremonies from all over the world. And they come and they are amazed by the power of doing it in a ceremonial setting, inside nature, with the music that we create and the way we do it. And also the group process and how that involves. And I would say, as for the people that go through it, you don't have to tell anybody that has been through it. No, like doing it here in nature, in this ceremonial setting with a loving environment and really preparing people a week before already and changing their diets in a way and really making them be aware that this is a very deep internal process. It's something that you have to work towards and prepare towards, and really creating like a womb-like feeling and a bath of love. How important that is, because you're so open, the neuroplasticity. So you want the newest pathways to really, you want the first tracks to be made, to be really loving and connected and just inspired in a way. And music is the tool to really explore the whole spectrum of emotions. And music has always been the tool. We are music, we are a frequency. Matter is basically a frequency. And you can speak to Nikola Tesla or read his work to find out. And that's been proven again and again. And music is also our language that has transcended from left to right, up and down, through all classes as well, whether it's in a soccer stadium with drums and singing or in a concert hall. So I think we know this to be true, and you also see that happening. And slowly the clinical and science is also looking into that, because the results are showing that doing it in those ways has a lot of benefits. So I like your question, and I think it's a dance that we're going to have to make as a society. And yes, I think there are streams within the medical system that are working in a direction because they are conditioned to go in that direction, and that is to create new molecules, because the IP and the system is built in such a way that you have to create a new molecule, and that you have to only prove the efficacy and the safety of the molecule for a specific diagnostic, so for a diagnose for a certain illness. And then you get like a pattern for X amount of years to make shitloads of money on it.
Yes.
So the system is rigged towards an isolated, reductive way, a materialistic way of thinking towards these molecules, and not in a more holistic view, because that's just how the system is currently working. The legal system is working in that way, that you have to approve, and that's also the research is funded from that side. I think throughout this research, when it gets more normalized and regulated and hopefully legalized, as you see in some states that still for ceremonial use there are exempts, and people can use it, and in certain states in the US, and of course within the Netherlands, we psilocybin truffles, so the magic truffles are fully legal, not for medical use yet, but that has to be approved by the European medical agencies, the EMA, and that's going to take a while. But I think the medical, working with psychiatrists and psychologists, which we do and have in our team as well, and they come to our ceremonies, I think they will experience the same as we do. And these are good people, and they will find ways that within the system to start introducing this and working with their patients and clients in ways. So it's not going to go from one day to another. And I think the wellness or side of the world, which is basically outside of the clinical, is going to have to take a lead in this. So the psychedelics for personal development, so to say. And then slowly, I think it will hopefully be adopted within the medical system. Because as I said, these are my brother. He's a trauma surgeon and lung surgeon. He's a great guy. He helps people really. He really helps. He's there to help people. And again, I think there's so many good people within the medical system that will start connecting with these substances and will start doing it and exploring it in deep ways, and gain an understanding. And then I think hopefully, centers will be built as they used to in the old traditions, in amazing natural settings. And we will use this while being guided by live musicians, and or specific, like we do, specific arrangement, and trips will be made with artists and musicians from all over the world to really create these guided experiences with meditations and breath work included in a really holistic healing path, and used for also wisdom purposes or vision quests. So it's not only to heal yourself. These psychedelics are also amazing to create new visions of the future.
Yes. As I've started thinking about the world more or seeing it differently over the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years, I've oscillated between people are fucked to actually no, people actually, I truly believe that 99% of people are good and want the best for everyone. And I think, like you said, it's actually when more people start connecting back to themselves and feeling connected to each other, that's when things change and systems change. And it's simply connecting back to yourself and each other, and then wanting to change the things that you see around you. The system won't change first. It will come from the people who feel that it could be different. And I think that's empowering as well, because it's just connecting to yourself, and then things around you change. Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that, because it can become a bit overwhelming at times. But when you simplify it and, or can feel that people are generally good, that things will be fine. And I think I'll just ask you one more question because I know it's late there. I don't want to keep you too long. But I think it was in your manifesto, you talk about healing the divide, and the world at times can be, very divided and can be quite black and white. And you're either for something or you're against it. And it's this really can feel very separate at times. So yeah, I'd love for you to talk to this notion of healing the divide and what that means for you, and how we go about doing that, and what the world looks like, I guess, once that divide begins to heal.
Yeah, thank you. The healing the great divide is basically on the two levels that we talked a little bit about. So it's healing, it's the mind-body split, and it's the divide between mankind and nature. And as we were saying just now, lead up to your question, I think it's really important that it's also the divide. There's even a third divide between left and right, or if you want to say that, I don't, it's between ignorance and wisdom. I think all people are born good. Of course, there are some very difficult mental diseases that can create really ugly viewpoints. But set aside from those, it's really within this collective conditioning that some people turn left and right. And if I look at myself, just if it wasn't for me feeling so shit at the end of a couple of years of drinking in university, that made me go on a travel to clean my perspective, and then a cascade of things happening. But still, then I needed so much yoga, meditation, and psychedelics to really open up my eyes. Even after years of study, for example, I don't drink for 10 years anymore. I've sold thousands and thousands of liters of alcohol when I was still working at Heineken.
Yeah.
And now looking back, maybe I wouldn't have joined Heineken, because I've started looking differently at the toxicity in alcohol. Not to say that people should drink their wines and their beers, and it was amazing and I've enjoyed them for sure. So all people need to make their own choices. But I'm just thinking is that to think in people are doing it wrong, or and they are the causes for this, and that is already creating a divide within you, and you're not open to looking at yourself in ways like, how was I 10 years ago? And I think that is also a divide that we have within the world, is we start blaming others for the things that are happening, and we really need to create a bridge, and not blame people for it, because we were as ignorant in a lot of ways, and then you can open up for a dialogue, and then we can find the wisdom which is innate and between us. We find the truth between, instead of fighting towards each other and gaining points or political points or financial gains, or it's a collaborative pursuit, wisdom, and that's also the way we wanted to approach it within Spinoza, to be open and welcoming, and to invite science in, but yes, create a setting where people can deeply connect with nature, so that divides, and deeply connect with their own true nature. And I really believe that if we can get enough people, also, the 1%ers, if you wanna call them, and that people that in high places, they're loving people, they love their children as well, and let's start inviting everybody in, and find ways for them to connect to that innate, beautiful, true nature they are, this loving, compassionate nature they are. And they can change their companies, and they can use their influence to change the world, and and also within politics. So I think it's great that some of that there are these people that are so passionate about nature, like the Extinction Rebellion. I don't know whether you have that
Yeah.
within Australia as well. In the Netherlands, there's one highway that they block and have been blocking for like a long time, and so it's causing a lot of resistance and frustration in ways. And I'm not saying they shouldn't or should. I think we also really need to create places where we're not fighting each other, where there's just an open dialogue and we
Hmm.
can celebrate. And I believe is that going out into nature and spending time together, and especially sometimes with the help of nature in the forms of beautiful plant medicine or fungi medicine, or can really be beneficial because they open you up and they unite you with people, and these people will change the world. Then the butterfly effect is there, and I think we started out that conversation, this beautiful evolutionary unfolding that we're part of is going according to plan. you
Yeah.
know it
Yes.
it 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 had to be like this, and it will come with great struggles. I believe in a happy end, and I'm willing to celebrate that, and I think we should dance and celebrate and have fun and enjoy, and also be realistic for the terrible suffering which is out there, and try to help out where we can, still have trust in our innate goodness, and embrace the people that view the world differently than I do or we do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful what you just said. And yeah, it's also, I think, just remembering that the majority of the time, issues that people fight, lack of a better word, fight about, they're actually just coming from the same place. They want to be the healthiest version for themselves and their families. But the foundation of their belief is the same. It's just that it can diverge in two different directions, So it's just when people can actually have a conversation and realize they're coming from the same place, then there can be more collaboration in what the solutions might be. So what you just said about just people coming together is, it's key, really. It's the basis of it all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Greeks left us with something good, and that's that dialogue, bringing conversation, the Socrates way. Ask the right questions, and you will find the answers. But be open, and the truth will be in between us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's now more than ever necessary to do that, because there is, wow, if you look at the online debates, but just in general, the world is again in great conflict.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, you guys are in Australia, and but we here in Europe are, we're really noticing it.
Mm.
It's close by. War is
Yes.
happening
Yes.
in the Middle East, and of course in Ukraine, and you feel it everywhere in the world at the moment.
Yes.
That
Yes.
that we need a very loving approach, and we need to rise above our differences, and acknowledge that we all love our children, and that we are often conditioned and wrong in the way we approach it through self-exploration, and a lot of things we are right in. So I'm not saying this that, but yeah, we need to be open and empathic to other views, and we're going to find a beautiful way. Well, sometimes we need to learn the hard way.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Maarten. Even if you're not interested in psychedelics, I think there was still so much valuable information in there, and a lot of what Maarten said can be applied to so many other things, or just, other ways of thinking. So I'll link to Spinoza's website and information in the show notes, and I'll also include a few other resources like books and podcasts and things in terms of psychedelics and the research and everything that's happening, if you're interested in finding out more. And please subscribe, let me know what you think, leave a review, and as always, thank you for listening.